And I just want to express a lot of gratitude for Rick and the pie experiment, if you will, because 5 years ago this didn't exist. And what's interesting to note is that 75% of the companies that are creating the most jobs in the United States right now weren't around even 5 years ago. A lot of you already know that in this room. I was appointed as a new director of Business Oregon, which is the state's economic development agency, on June 1st of this past year by the governor. And one of the first things we did is we traveled all around the state. We talked to a lot of people in a lot of different communities, 11 communities throughout the state, including Portland, but other places like Medford, Oregon, Bend, Oregon, Astoria, every part of the corner of this state. And one of the things that we learned very quickly is that government and private sector have an active role to play in supporting the ecosystem and growth of what is probably one of our most important economic development drivers for our future in this state, which is entrepreneurship and innovation and the startup community. So for many, many years, economic development across the country and even in the state of Oregon has been driven in large part by a desire to try and go out and recruit and incentivize new companies to come to town. Thought being, hey, if we just put up some really great billboards, magazine advertising, and advertisements in airport tarmacs, that in fact companies will just show up and we'll incentivize them to be here. But the data actually says something pretty different if you look at it. And I'm a data guy. So 70% of all of the job growth that occurs in the average community in this country occurs from the companies that are already here, starting by investing in the companies that we have, and the entrepreneurs and the startups who are part of creating and pushing that growth going forward. Only a small portion of the remainder is the traditional recruitment stuff that you see that gets the top of the fold headlines, if you will. Makes for a great camera, a picture, a photo op, great ribbon cutting, but the reality is it doesn't create the most jobs. Startups, entrepreneurship create the most jobs, and helping the existing companies that we already have expand. This morning, I got off a plane from Tokyo. I'd spent 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks in Asia, starting in Beijing, going to Taipei, going to Hong Kong, going to Kyoto, Osaka, and finishing in Tokyo. And one of the most important things I saw was a story of what could be across this state between the public sector and the private sector working together for partnerships. The signature research centers across the state are something that this state's invested in for many years to drive innovation and commercialization of new products out from the pipeline. There's one called the Oregon Nanotechnologies and Microtechnologies Institute, if that's not a mouthful enough on its own, ONAMI. Well, ONAMI helped commercialize a product from a company called Voxtel. Small company, stunning new technology in the nanotechnology space. Voxtel was able to attract capital from Japan, one of the longest and most important trading relationships that the state of Oregon has had to capitalize the growth of their company. They were so impressed, by the way, when I met the executives in Tokyo about the ecosystem that existed in this state, the power of the technology, their ability to recruit talent in the state of Oregon, that they subsequently purchased the company and are now looking to expand that company by building a mass production facility in the Mid-Willamette Valley, producing this nanotechnology that will be exported all around the world on the displays that are on your iPhones or your computers. It illustrates an important point, going from the very, very beginning research and development innovation that occurs, and that the state of Oregon, the national governments can be useful in investing and being a catalyst for, all the way through to the capitalization of that company, and subsequently the growth of those companies to keep the jobs here in the state of Oregon and recycle that capital back into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I'd like to replicate that story and a lot of other stories like it, maybe 100 times over in the next few years. And the way we're going to do that is by investing in the companies that we already have here, the talents and the entrepreneurs that are part of the state's ecosystem. We have a really good problem in this state, is that we're able to attract a significant amount of really smart, educated people to this place. And there are some out there who think that that's a detriment, that we can do that. In fact, I think it's our greatest strength. So going forward, the state of Oregon and the economic development efforts that we have through Business Oregon are going to shift gears a bit, moving away from the traditional recruitment and incentivizing of new companies from South Carolina or Virginia or Texas, or for that matter, any other state in the country, and focus more of our resources, our time and energy, investing it in audiences like this, in the startups, the commercialization of new technology, the signature research centers across the state, attracting more capital to this state, helping additional talent recruitment efforts, to get the right talent, the right management here on top of what we already have, supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem of organizations like the Oregon Angel Fund, Oregon Entrepreneurs Network, PI, and the ecosystem of accelerators we have across the state, and really bring us together under one narrative. And that's the last thing we're doing, is we're in the process right now of taking all of those disparate resources that have for a long time existed in the state of Oregon for innovation entrepreneurship, and we're bringing them together into one team within the state so that all of those resources that are out there now start to come together under common umbrella. So we're appointing right now an entrepreneurship and innovation czar that will be inside the entity. We'll be building out a team of individuals inside the state, not your usual suspects, but entrepreneurial, energy-driven individuals that will be able to help connect with this community, but other communities across the state, all through the lens of investing in growing our own companies in this state. Because the reality is this state, I think, has all of the assets that it needs to be able to grow and be on par with any other global economy in the world if we start to let ourselves be creative and think forward in that respect. Because when you go to places like Tokyo and Beijing and Hong Kong, you realize there's a long way for us to go to be able to compete on that stage. But the reality is that that window is beginning to open here in a place like it never has before. And it's in large part because of organizations like PI and the efforts that have been made, but it's also because we have folks like you in this room and the folks backstage who I've had an opportunity to sort of mingle with, who are driving that next level of entrepreneurship and innovation. So I'll leave it at that. I know I'm the last thing between here and a beer at the reception, so that's the end of it. But thank you so much. I believe Rick's coming out maybe with a few more comments, but I appreciate your partnership. Thank you.